The Torah portion is one of the most interesting Torah readings we have, where we have, for the first time in Jewish history, we have an open opposition to Moshe, to our famous leader, Moshe Rabbeinu, the one who took us out of Egypt, the one who gave us the Torah, brought down the tablets, and yet we're having a very unpleasant episode here where Korakh leads some sort of a rebellion, almost like a political action against Moshe and against Moshe's authority. We will take a look at what happened there and we'll try to connect it with the current culture. That's why I call this lecture Korakh and the cancel culture. We will connect it with the current events and what happens today. Surprisingly, one can arguably say Korakh's story happened many years, almost like 3,300 years ago, 300 years ago, and still he seems to have some followers in modern day American and British universities, and we will talk about it very soon. We will make that connection. So stay with us to the end to find out how the events of the Torah are relevant to what's happening. But before we get to what's happening today, we will need to understand the story. So we will take a look at chapter 18 in Bamidbar. Those on Zoom will be able to see the text. I will be sharing the content with you. And of course, I'm going to go to all the text for those with us on Facebook. So you certainly will be able to follow us as well. Let's take a look at the story of Korakh. So we're in the fourth book of Torah, Sefer Bamidbar, Parshat Korakh. Chapter 16. So Korakh has been leading this rebellion with another people mentioned by name, that's Datan and Aviram, coming from the tribe of Reuven. And later on, we're going to see we have in a group, a significant group from the tribe of Levi, 250 people. They'll mention later in the text. They confronted, let's take a look what is exactly their argument. It's an organized act of dissent against Moshe's authority. They confronted Moshe together with 250 men, chieftains of the congregation, men of repute. These were reputable people. These were not just simple people. These were not just, as we say, Amon Ha'am, not just the commoners. They were all leaders, powerful people. They assembled against Moshe and Aaron and said to them, you take too much upon yourselves. You take too much upon yourselves. In other words, too much power, it seems. You have summoned too much power. For the entire congregation are all holy. And the Lord is in their midst. Sounds like a beautiful argument, almost like they're asking for equality. Everybody should be represented equally. Equal representation. Every person counts. They're all holy. So why do you raise yourselves above the Lord's assembly? You are just trying to usurp power. That's what they're being accusing Moshe and Aaron of. Now, if you remember, of course, Moshe being the humblest of all men, it's hard to imagine him being a dictator. It's hard to imagine him being somebody who is so thirsty of having power. We remember we recently spoke about the episode where his disciple Yeshua is concerned with the fact that some of the elders, some of the leaders of the nation were continuously prophesying where the prophecy already ceased. Their names, they mentioned by names, Eldad or Meidad. And so Yeshua has been very upset with the fact that they continue to do this. Somehow it appears the challenging authority of Moshe. Moshe is not concerned to the least. Moshe says, don't be a zealot. That's okay. Let every single Jew be a prophet. That's the best thing that can happen. That's the best thing that can happen to our people. Everybody should become a prophet. So it's hard to imagine a person like this who is actually so much caring about his people, who is constantly thinking of how to make it better for the Jewish people. He's even willing to put his own life on the stake. He says, if you're going to destroy the Jewish people, if you're going to destroy this nation, go ahead and erase me from this book. He's willing to put everything, his reputation, his honor, even his name should be erased. Would you imagine a person like this, so caring for his people, will be the one to be accused of usurping power, or the one to be accused of trying to rule over the people without being concerned with them? That appears to be totally absurd. And yet, we're going to hear what happens later. We're going to see even more absurd accusations later on. So Moshe heard and fell on his face. Falling on the face, of course, is the recognition of the fact that something at this point, what happens at this point is only requiring divine assistance. Only God can help in this situation. And so it's his total submission to Hashem, his total understanding that he is not the one to, resolve this case. It's something that's coming from Hashem. It's a direct challenge to his authority, but it happens for a reason. Now he's speaking to Korakh and to his company and saying the following: Hashem will make known who is his and who is holy. And he will draw them near to him. And the one he chooses will be drawn near to Hashem. He suggests a test. Korakh wants to be the leader, it seems. He doesn't say that directly, by the way. It's interesting to see that Korakh is not saying directly he wants to be the leader. Korakh is just saying, you usurped all the power. Everybody was at Sinai, everybody heard God. We are equal. So shouldn't we be treated equally? Much like, this reminds me, much like the Soviet Bolshevik Revolution of 1917, that they were claiming that the power should belong to the people. Everybody should be treated equally. But then there was a joke in my time already, in late 70s and 80s, when the Soviet regime was well known for, not exactly giving freedom to people and not exactly treating people and allowing them a freedom of speech. And so there was a famous joke, these leaders of the people who usurp power to themselves, claiming that they want to make it all equal for everybody. They were the ones who called themselves in Russian Slugi Naroda. They were, the servants of the people. They were doing it in the best interest of everybody else. They were just serving people, right? So, and of course, everybody was equal. So the joke was going on that everybody's equal, but some people are more equal than others. Much like in Orwellian literature, in Animal Farm, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others, right? So that's exactly what happened there. And again, you take a look at the Torah, lo and behold, you see in the story of Korakh, the example of a first leader who is doing exactly the same thing. At the end of the day, it's very, very clear if you really take a perceptive look at what Korakh really wants to do. How do I know that? Well, there's a famous psychological line. If you want to know what the other person wants, listen carefully to what he has to say about other people. What he criticizes in people around him is exactly what he has in him. What he doesn't like in the world is exactly what he has in him. What he claims other people are doing is exactly what he does. If we take that line of thinking, we understand that if Korakh is accusing Moshe of taking power, what essentially Korakh wants, he wants power. That's all he wants. That's all he cares about. He wants to take the power. And of course, he sugarcoats it with a beautiful argument of equality, with a beautiful argument that everybody stood at Sinai, and we should all have it equal. And you, Moshe and Aaron, you're the ones that took all the power. Moshe's response is a very humble one. He falls and he accepts it as a challenge from God. But then he also knows how to be a strong leader. He says, you know what? You want to become a Kohen, you want to serve God, you want to be like one who serves him very closely. God will make that decision. We got to have a test. You're going to be tested with the most spiritual of all the workings that eventually will be done in the temple, bringing the Ktoret, something that eventually Kohen Gadol, the high priest, will be doing in the Holy of Holies in the temple, which of course is a bit of a hint. If you're not up to it, you need to understand that the result may be totally disastrous for you. He's kind of giving him a hint. And he says, you think he didn't get enough up until now? It's not enough, he says, that the God of Israel has distinguished you from the congregation of Israel, because you already are belonging to the tribe of Levi, the distinguished tribe, to draw you near to him, to perform the service in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle of the Lord, to stand before the congregation. He drew you near, and all your brothers, the sons of Levi. And now you want to seek to become a priest. Now it's not enough for you want to get the priesthood, right? You now want to become even more important. You want to become the VIP. In other words, Moshe is actually telling him, you know what, I read you, I understand you want power. You seek power, that's what you seek. And then it says, therefore, you and your entire company are assembled against Hashem. You are assembling against me and Aaron. It seems like your argument is for the sake of God. You want to sugarcoat your personal desire for power with the best interest for the sake of the people. You pretend that it's all for the better of the world, for the better of a society. And you accuse me and Aaron, and it seems like your fight is against us. But at the end of the day, the fight is against God. For what is Aaron that you should complain against him? In other words, we understand that Korakh was pretending to, under that argument of everybody's equal, he actually wanted to take the position of a high priest. He wanted to become personally a high priest. He wanted to be on top. So he claimed, Moshe and Aaron, you usurped the power, but what he essentially wants, he wants to take the power. It's a very interesting psychological type of thing. Listen carefully to what other people are saying about, surroundings, what they accuse people of, and you know of their true nature, you know what they actually want. Now, remember at this episode, Korah has two allies. And these allies, Datan and Abiram, apparently they got nothing to do with anything related to the status of a Kohen. They're not even from the tribe of Levi. So Moshe reasons that possibly he can make peace with his people. And he goes all the way. We can see in another part of his character, he's been a truly humble man, Moshe. He would personally go and visit these people, knowing that these people are confronting him and accusing him of terrible things. He would go all the way out of his majestic power. He's Moshe Rabbeinu, he's the head of the nation, right? But he would be a true leader of his people. He would go and approach them personally. So he goes and approaches them. But they don't want to go. They don't even want to see him. And instead, they tell him, we will not go and meet you. And listen to what they say. This is truly incredible. Today we have this expression, fake news. It seems to be a very modern concept. Apparently, we have the origin of fake news right here in the Parsha. Take a look at it. It's absolutely unbelievable. They say, it's not enough that you have brought us out of the land. They're talking about the land of slavery. See how they call it. You brought us out of the land flowing with milk and honey. What? It's the Egypt where they were slaves. The land of milk and honey, my friends, is the land of Israel they are going to. Instead, it's upside down. It's the world where Egypt, where there were slaves now, is the land of milk and honey. How is that even possible? Well, you don't need to look any further. Take a look at what happens in the world today. Black is white. Dark is light. The sweet and becomes all of a sudden bitter, and the bitter is sweet. By the way, the sweet is bitter and bitter is sweet. That's what is predicted by our prophets. One of the prophecies of Isaiah say there will be time where everything will be upside down. They didn't use the term fake news back then. They didn't know about it yet. Take a look at what these people are doing. It's the best form of defense. You attack. They claim, Datan and Abiram, they claim you didn't do any good to us. You took us from a beautiful, wonderful place. Egypt was a beautiful, wonderful place. It was the place flowing with milk and honey. What? Egypt? You were slaves there. But that's in their mind. It's a very deceptive technique, right? That's in their mind. It's a total rebuttal. What can be said to this? And not only that, See how vicious you are, Moshe. You took us from a beautiful place, Egypt, to kill us in the desert. You took us from there to kill us in the desert. That you should also exercise authority over us. Oh my gosh. That doesn't even make sense how you can exercise authority if you are here to kill them. But it doesn't have to make sense. Each and every part is a separate accusation. And altogether, it becomes very clear that they're not interested in any sort of a dialogue. They're not interested in hearing what Moshe has to say back. They are here to accuse him. They are here to cause him being emotionally hurt. And Moshe would be emotionally hurt by these accusations because these are his people at the end of the day. It's a terrible act of betrayal to go and claim that the person who was willing to say to God, erase my name from this book, but let these people leave. Every single time the Jewish people were sinning, Moshe was there for them. This is a tremendous ingratitude one can think of, to turn things upside down and to make Moshe into a villain who is here to literally kill the Jewish people. Well, this is what fake news is. Egypt, which is a place of slavery, becomes all of a sudden a land flowing with milk and honey. It's unbelievable, right? So you don't even need to take a look at what they tell you at the news. You know, the source of it is right here. It's right in our Torah portion. You see it. It's all there. And of course, Moshe at this point is going to be very hurt. Moshe was exceedingly distressed. And he said to Hashem, do not accept the offering. It's the only time he says, God, do not accept the offering. I have not taken a donkey from a single one of them. And I have not harmed a single one of them. Moshe at this point does take it personally, takes it very emotionally. After everything that he did to his people, you know, you at least would expect a little bit of thank you, a little bit of a recognition. What do you get back? You are the one who took us out from the land of milk and honey to kill us in the desert and then to rule upon us. It's not exactly here how you're gonna rule upon the people already dead, but that doesn't make any difference. The argument is still there. Moshe says, I did not harm a single one of them. I have not taken a donkey from a single one of them. We know that Moshe was that type of a leader that was never dependent on people. He was always capable of being an independent leader in all sense of the words, including financially, it seems. Moshe said to Korakh, you and your entire congregation should be before Hashem and Aaron tomorrow. Each man is going to take his machta is a special frying pan that's being used to bring the incense and place incense upon it, and let each man present his machta, his frying pan, before Hashem. So there's going to be 250 censers, 250 machtot. And on the other hand, Aaron will be standing as a high priest with Korakh, with the incense in his machta, his frying pan. And so they're standing there in front of the entrance to the tent of meeting. Moshe and Aaron on one side, 250 rebels on the other, and the congregation is standing and watching there. So the congregation is being assembled, and Korakh seems to be a very good diplomat, or we can also call him a very good demagogue. He knew how to manipulate people. He had those slogans of, you know, everybody stood at sign, we're all equal, we don't need Moshe and Aaron as a leader. We already understand his agenda was, which he didn't tell us openly, his agenda was that not that everybody shall be equal, but he will become the high priest. He clearly wanted to have some personal gain out of this whole situation. But he was quite successful in his act of actually stripping the authority from Moshe. So when these people are going to be eventually killed by their own stupidity, the congregation, the people will come and complain to Moshe and Aaron that they killed innocent people. In other words, Korakh was so good at his act of manipulation that he successfully managed to manipulate many, many people around. Now the glory of Hashem appears before the congregation. Hashem is speaking to Moshe, and he says, disassociate yourselves Moshe and Aaron from this congregation. I will consume them in an instant. At this point, Hashem is angry at the whole congregation because it sees the whole congregation now standing, not with Moshe, their true leader. They're standing with his demagogue. They're standing with Korakh. They are supporting of Korakh. And Hashem again wants to destroy the whole congregation. And it says, speak to the congregation saying, withdraw from the dwelling of Korakh, Datan, and Abiram. Now, so finally they withdrew from around the dwelling of Korakh, Datan, and Abiram. Datan and Abiram over there having their own agenda, not very clear what's their agenda even is, but they openly fighting Moshe and his authority. And they are standing upright in the entrance of their tents with all their families. Now, a miracle here happens and the earth eventually will swallow them. They will be swallowed alive. Pretty devastating thing. So the Datan and Abiram will be swallowed alive, and the 250 people bringing their offering, the fire will come from heaven, and these people will be consumed. A terrible thing, a terrible destruction caused by a desire of these people to basically, for their personal interest, it seems, to basically go ahead and, create what they think a better world. But the leaders of this rebellion, that's Korakh himself, at least, knows exactly that the better world will be an Orwellian world where equality is distributed in very unequal terms and all the power goes to him. Now, at this point, when earth goes and swallows them alive, of course, people are extremely frightened. People who were there, all Israel who were around them, fled from their cries. See, that's verse 34, and it said, lest the earth swallow us up too. Fire comes forth from Hashem and consumes the 250. Now, it's a terrible, terrible disaster that happens here. You're going to see the next chapter. Let's take a look at chapter 16 for a second. Sorry, chapter 17, I mean. Chapter 17. The following day, and they saw an open miracle, don't forget that. They saw the presence of God the way we don't see. At this point, you would think they would understand who's right and who's wrong. Having all this relationship with Moshe going on for years. And yet, it didn't help. The following day, the entire congregation complained against Moshe and Aaron, saying, you have killed the people of Hashem. So that act of a demagogue, his manipulation, his public PR was so successful, his fake news campaign was so good that even after they died, even after the presence of God was revealed, people are still not convinced. They're saying, you have killed the people of Hashem. So you are the villains, Moshe and Aaron. They were the good people, you are the villains. Isn't that an unbelievable thing? How powerful this could be. A deception, manipulation could be very, very powerful. Years after communism died in Russia, I remember in late 80s when Gorbachev took power, some people were thinking it's the end of the world. When Stalin, a terrible dictator, was preparing to send Jewish people all the way to Far East, thinking of some of them dying in a way, who killed tens of millions of his own people in gulags. When he died in 1953, people, some of them very smart people, including my great-grandmother, were saying it's the end of the world, what's going to happen? How are we going to continue our existence? What's going to happen? So sometimes you take a look at the world, it appears to be an insane place, but we need not to go any further. We can start from ourselves. How easily are we being manipulated by the culture of fake news? How easy it is for the television, for the media to set an agenda to tell us who's right, who's wrong. And you see, here, these people, after witnessing the act of God, after witnessing clearly, that they were destroyed by God, the very following day they come to Moshe and Aaron and say, you're the villains. You killed the people of God. They're the people of God, and you're the villains. Very interesting. So I will stop it over here. I would not continue the reading from the Torah, even though it carries on as another couple of interesting moments further on in the text. But I think we accomplished the part that is most interesting and most related to us. Rabbi Sachs, as always, I will quote a little bit from Rabbi Sachs. Rabbi Sachs wants to compare this culture that is being exposed in the Torah portion with what happens today. And I will quote a little bit from his article, which he wrote, where he speaks about a culture today in the universities and campuses. They call it a cancel culture. What is exactly the cancel culture? The cancel culture is basically a character assassination. But instead of dealing with a person's opinion, instead of dealing with what he has to say, you just don't let him talk. You tell everybody he's a racist, he's a villain, he's a terrible person, he's a right-wing extremist, he who knows what he is. Yeah. So he's not being, it's not worth listening to. And cancel culture, call-out culture, would use social media basically to turn people into basically non-persons, And sometimes it could be GD. Sometimes we're talking about certain episodes we saw recently in the media with some sexual harassment scandals. This could be some real issues there. But sometimes it could be just because the particular individual goes against what's accepted in universities as the right opinion. And his opinion is very much out of fashion, out of moral fashion of the moment. And he says, Rabbi Sachs, it's particularly disturbing, the growing practice of denying or withdrawing a platform at university to someone whose views are deemed to be offensive to some minority group. And he gives a few examples. In March 2020, just before universities were shut down, because of COVID, of course, right? Oxford University professor Selina Todd was not platformed by the Oxford International Women's Festival, at which she had been due to speak. A leading scholar of women's lives, she had been deemed transphobic. She had been deemed transphobic, a charge that she denies. Around the same time, the UN Women Oxford UK Society cancelled the talk by former Home Secretary Amber Rudd an hour before it was due to take place. We're talking about some mainstream people, mainstream intellectuals, mainstream politicians, but they out of fashion. They're not talking the language that today it becomes a culture, becomes something that everybody needs to adhere to. 2019, Cambridge University Divinity School, he brings examples from England. We know similar examples here across the pond in America as well. So Divinity School of Cambridge decided to take off its offer of visiting fellowship to a famous Canadian professor of psychology, Jordan Peterson. You've probably heard his name. Jordan Peterson is a very traditional, he has very, very traditional views, and he's been criticized for that. And Cambridge University student union commented, his work and views are not representative of the student body, and as such, we do not see his visit as valuable contribution to university. In other words, basically, we don't like what he has to say, and therefore, we don't even need to argue with him. We can just shut him down. We can just cancel him out and make him into para and make him into something that is not even worth relating to. We don't even need to argue with him. His opinion does not belong. For me, coming from a country that did not have a freedom of speech, it's a terrible thing to see this happening these days here in America or in England, countries where freedom of speech is the basis of the culture. And basically, says Rav Sachs, these are contemporary instances, contemporary examples of arguments that are not for the sake of having. Instead of having an argument, a decent argument where the two sides have respect to each other, where we can hear a dialogue. We shut one of those sides. We don't let them talk. We cancel them. We create this cancel culture. This is the argument, says Rav Sachs, that in our tradition is called argument not for the sake of heaven. That's exactly the argument of Korakh. Korakh's argument was, it appears, it was sugar-coated with a desire to make it better for the people. Everybody was at Sinai, we are equal. Let's make it better for everybody. You, Moshe and Aaron, took all the power. Yet what he actually wanted was to take all the power to himself. He wanted to shut down any opposition. He wanted to create a character assassination of Moshe, by that shutting him down and taking all the power to himself. That's what he wanted to accomplish. So that, of course, is the argument, not for the sake of heaven. That's been brought as an example of such. On the other hand, what's the example of the argument for the sake of heaven? We're having in the Talmud plenty of arguments. The whole culture of the Talmud is to hear and to take a look at both sides of the spectrum, to hear two different opinions. The most famous, of course, would be the argument between the schools of Shammai and Hillel. Two schools of thought were arguing on many issues in the Talmud. And the rabbis in the Talmud are telling us a paradoxical type of statement to say, Elo ve'elo divrei Elokim chayim. These and those are words of living God. In other words, they are both right. Like in a famous joke about a rabbi, two people come and they disagree with each other. Of course, they want to hear the rabbi's opinion. So a rabbi is listening to the first party and says, Moshe, you are right. He listens to the second party, totally disagrees with him. And he says, yes, Yitzchak, you're right too. And then the woman sitting there says, Rabbi, but they argue, they disagree with each other. They can't be both right. And he says, woman, you are right too. That is, of course, a joke, but we understand that part of our culture, part of our Jewish culture, up until today at least, was the desire to seek the truth, the desire to recognize that each of us, the truth is very fragmented, each of us, and that refers to all spheres of life, has a particular version of the truth. We need to carefully listen to each other. We need to be aware we don't have all the truth with us. We need to be aware of the need to have a meaningful dialogue. And even if halachic decision goes in a particular way, because we need to have clarity, it follows usually the school of Hillel. When it comes to what truth with a capital T is, which is so much better and so much bigger than any one of us, and it's unlimited and it belongs to God, in our human terms, both are right. Both Hillel and Shammai, because they're arguing for the sake of heaven, and each of them revealing a particular aspect of the truth. Each of them is revealing something that's important for the world. They're not seeking power. They're not seeking desire to rule like Korakh, or like the Bolsheviks in 1917, or like in the Orwellian literature, like in Animal Farm, or they're not trying to manipulate the crowd like the fake news culture or the cancel culture of today. They are genuinely seeking to know God. They are genuinely open to hear and listen to each other, hear the other opinions. And that's a type of culture that we need today, desperately need today. So what happens is very, very disturbing, not only to Rabbi Sachs, it's very disturbing to me as well. Again, going back to the story, probably the most powerful moment is when Moshe goes and approaches Datan and Aviram. He's a humble man. He's willing to make peace. For the sake of peace, he can't get off his high horse. He doesn't need that. He doesn't need that authority. He's been, they claim you're trying to usurp power. He would truly try to usurp power. He certainly would not do that, right? But he's trying to negotiate. He's trying to seek some sort of a compromise and peace with his people. All they tell him, they're not even willing to meet with him. They don't want to talk to Moshe. They sent through a messenger. You took us out of the land flowing milk and honey. What is it? It's a total manipulation and total, fake news type of thing where black becomes white. Egypt, that was a place of slavery, becomes a land of milk and honey. That's their tactic. That's what they want to do. A tactic of distortion and manipulation that has been used by today's media. And they claim that Moshe is doing it for his personal sake. You're trying to rule upon us. You took us out of land, a beautiful place, land flowing milk and honey, to kill us in the desert in order to be able to rule upon us, to create some sort of gulag, who knows what. But that's exactly what they want to do. They're accusing him of what they want to do. Listen carefully to what other people are talking about, how they talk about other people. You're going to know not so much about other people. You're going to know about them. That's exactly what they do. So, my friends, we live at a very dangerous time when the freedom of speech has been compromised in this country. And the media is right at the core of this. Scandalous, unbelievable, fake news culture. But we should know better. We can look in the Torah. We know this story goes back 3,300 years ago. Moshe Rabbeinu himself became a victim of that culture. The only difference is, back then, God could show us the way, and miracles were around. We don't have that today. God can still show us the way, but we need to pay very, very, very close attention to what's happening and to see who is trying to manipulate us, who is trying to use what's happening to their personal benefit, who is trying to set an agenda. And in my opinion, in my mind, in my book, when I hear somebody saying racist, fascist, Nazi, character assassination right away, to me, it's a sign it's already ringing a bell. To me, it's a sign, instead of having an intellectual argument, honest argument, heart-to-heart argument, where we're willing to listen to each other, they're trying to shut them down because it's dangerous. That's exactly what they did in the communist regimes. It's a very dangerous precedent being created here in the last couple of years. We need to be aware. So, my friends, this parsha, this Torah portion, is surprisingly relevant to what's happening around. I wish it wouldn't be that relevant, but it is. All I can say again is, arguments for the sake of heaven are necessary and important. I think in a culture we live in today, where every opinion should count, every person should be able to express his opinion, we should be able to learn how to listen to each other. We should be able to learn how to have a dialogue where we don't feel the need to destroy the other person, where we don't feel the desire to create the type of scenario where he's a villain before we even can listen to what he has to say. Judaism is telling us that every human being is created in the image of God. We can think of movements of people. We can think of political parties. We can think of all sorts of associations that they represent a particular part of that big vision of God. Each carries a little fragmented version of the truth. I'm not talking about some really extreme cases of absolute evil like Nazism. I don't think we have it today, maybe KKK. But I'm talking about the mainstream, normal politics we see in America, in England, in any Western country, anywhere around the world. You have different versions of truth. None of them is with a capital T, only God has the capital T. What we need to do here, we need to be able to listen to each other. That belongs not only in the world of politics, that is true also in the world of a family where husband and wife could argue about all sorts of nonsense, right? And sometimes it gets into name calling instead of having a normal, decent argument. It could be true about a friend in a situation where all of a sudden something happens and it somehow stepped on my ego, and now I feel the need to destroy the other person, to retaliate. I think we need to be more sensitive to when we're being challenged emotionally so that we feel the need to retaliate, because that could be not good for us. Anytime I'm angry, I probably should take a deep breath and not respond, because out of anger, I'm not going to say good words. I'm not going to say something smart. There is a beautiful expression in the Talmud. Keshem shel mitzvah lomar davar nishmar. As much as a mitzvah, it's a commandment to say something that will be heard. So too, there is a mitzvah not to say something. Mitzvah lo lomar davar lo nishmar. Not to say something that would not be heard. Before I say something in anger or when I'm trying to, retaliate, I can take a deep breath. I can think, how's the other person going to respond? Is it going to be helpful? Is it going to help us in our relationship?
Yeah.
Is it going to be constructive or is it going to be destructive? So that's very, very important, I think, for us to consider. And with that, I want to wish everybody peace in the families and in homes and good health. And shalom. Thank you very much for watching.